If you're thinking about leaving Minnesota when you retire because of taxes, this video will help you figure out if that's actually a good reason to leave or if there's some other things that might matter more. One of the most common questions I get when I talk to people who live in this state is, should I move out of Minnesota when I retire? And almost every time that question comes up, it's got one underlying theme: taxes. I live in Minnesota. Minnesota has high taxes. There's other states that have lower taxes. So moving must be a good financial decision for me. And it's pretty common thinking, but it is totally incomplete. And it does make sense, by the way, because Minnesota does have high income taxes. We also have winters, and you constantly hear about other states that market themselves as retirement friendly states. So it's natural to think, well, why wouldn't I move if I can lower my tax bill? Especially when you're entering a phase of life where your income feels maybe less flexible and the decisions you're making feel more permanent. So there's nothing irrational about the thinking of get out of Dodge once I retire. But here's where the tax only mental model there starts to break down. Where you live in retirement affects far more than your tax rate. And all of those other pieces interact with each other in a big way. So when people frame this as purely a tax decision, they tend to kind of unintentionally leave out several major factors that have to do with leaving the state. The first one is their family proximity. So if you live here and you've got family roots here, that likely means maybe your kids lived here, your parents lived here, your siblings lived here, your grandkids live here. And you have to think about how often will you realistically see them if you leave the state. The second is similar, but it's your social ties. So you've got friends, you've got routines, you've got community, and that sense of belonging that you've probably developed over decades. And is it worth resetting that to a certain extent? The third becomes actually bigger when you retire, and that's your healthcare access and continuity of your healthcare. So you've probably got doctors, healthcare systems, you've got care you're already trusting, and this matters more when you age. Of course, in retirement, one of the biggest expenses later on is healthcare. So having a good system there requires some thought. The fourth is going to be your lifestyle and your daily rhythm. So I'm not talking about your vacation lifestyle, what you do when you just go on vacation and sit on a beach. I'm talking about what your weeks actually look like. What are you going to do in daily life? And how is that going to change when you're not in your home state anymore? Fifth, this is one that gets overlooked quite often, are just the relocation and ongoing costs associated with moving out of state. We all know moving isn't free. So there are expenses related to moving in general. There's the housing reset, there's property taxes, insurance, all the things that you have to actually think about. And additionally, this is one I see a lot, is the cost of traveling back home to be with your friends and family who you've potentially left back here. And yes, the last one, taxes are absolutely a factor in the equation. And for some people, that's a substantial factor, but it's only part of the equation. So the problem isn't that people consider moving because of taxes. The problem is that taxes, in a lot of cases, do all the decision making. So this is why some people move after retirement and they save money on paper on their tax return, but they still feel unsettled. They end up traveling back constantly. I've had clients who have moved out of state and then subsequently moved back. They miss the relationships, their spending patterns change in ways they didn't expect. And the issue isn't the move itself, it's that their decision to move was framed too narrowly and didn't take all these other things into account. So a tax only lens explains some numbers on your tax return, but it doesn't explain satisfaction. So a better way to think about this is to treat where you live as a systems decision, not just a tax decision. Taxes matter, but they also interact with your income, your lifestyle, your relationships, your health. And good retirement planning doesn't only ask where are taxes lowest, it asks where does my life actually work best, both financially and personally. So here's a simple way to stress test your own thinking around making a move out of Minnesota when you retire. And this really applies to any state, anybody in any state who's thinking about relocating. And that's this: if taxes were identical everywhere, would you still want to move? If the answer is yes, then that's absolutely worth exploring. But if the answer is no, if you'd stay here all else equal, then taxes might be carrying more weight in this decision than they actually should be. Remember, the goal isn't going to be whether to stay or leave. The goal is to make a decision that you won't be second guessing 5 or 10 years into retirement.